Hi, everyone. So today we're going to look at chapter 28. And I'm sure most of you already know, tomorrow we're going to start the Gospel of Mark, and my brother Mark is going to begin to lead us in that study. So Acts 28, it begins with Paul and Luke being shipwrecked on the island of Malta. In verse 3, we're told that the locals showed a lot of kindness to them, built a fire, and we find Paul collecting wood. And this is significant because it sheds light on Paul's character. Paul had become a humble person. Paul was a different person than that Saul who came riding into Damascus on a horse and God threw him off the horse. Something had happened. Paul had learned humility. Now, while Paul was gathering wood, a viper attached itself to Paul's hand. Viper meaning poisonous. And he shook the snake off, and the locals saw that and were expecting Paul to swell up, die, something. And when nothing happened, they just assumed that Paul had some kind of supernatural power. We're told that Paul went through the island after a couple days. He had the opportunity to visit with the governor, and while visiting the governor, he found out that the governor's father had dysentery. And dysentery was very serious in the first century. What we're talking about is diarrhea. And when a person had dysentery in the first century, there wasn't any way to stop it. And so a person would die of dehydration. It's a very, very serious thing. Well, Paul laid hands on him and healed him. And in verse 9, we're told that after that, the people came from all over the island to be healed. And the New American Standard says, by him. But if you look at every other translation, New King James, NIV, King James, ESV, in the translation, it doesn't add that little phrase, by him, because it's not in the Greek. I looked, I double checked, you can. What it literally means is, all the other translations say they came to be healed. Literally, in the Greek, it means medical attention, to give medical attention. So what I think was happening was the people were coming because they heard that there was a healer there, but also a doctor. So two things were happening. Luke, if he knew what to do, was helping with their illness, and then Paul was also praying for people. And it just reminds me how important medical mission are. Anyway, after 3 months, Paul and Luke leave on a wheat ship. They land at the port of Puteoli, which is the main wheat port of Italy. They travel to Rome, and at 43 miles away from Rome, at Appius, they are met by some Christians. 10 miles further, at 3 inns, they are at 33 miles from Rome, they are met by more Christians. And it says that Paul is encouraged. Why? You'd have to think that Paul understood now he wasn't going to be alone. There was going to be Christians who would be there praying for him, so forth. Paul gets to Rome. He's put under house arrest. He's allowed to rent his own house. Within a couple days, he calls the Jewish leaders. He preaches the gospel to them. Most of them reject what he's telling them about Jesus. And then for 2 years, we're told that Paul preached the gospel to anyone who would come to him. During those years, Paul wrote Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and the book of Philemon. And then it's over. Chapter 28 just ends. Luke just cuts it off. He doesn't tell us what happened to Paul. We're left really wondering what happened. Was Paul released? Some scholars think he might have been executed. I don't think so, because tradition tells us that he went to Spain. Is now the time he went to Spain? What happened to his appeal to Caesar? Did the Jews not show up? What about the Christians in Rome? We don't know any of that. But then we have to remember, what was the main reason why Luke wrote the book of Acts? He wrote it as a history so that we would know how Christianity spread in such a short time, from 120 believers to tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of believers all over the Mediterranean. There are 4 takeaways that I have from chapter 28. The first takeaway is Paul's humility. Paul was just not the same person that he was when he went into Damascus years ago. He didn't think more highly of himself as he should. As he mentions in Romans 12:3, you and I as Christians should not think more highly of ourselves than we should. Paul didn't think he was better than anyone else, and so he was out gathering wood. These kind people shouldn't have to serve him. He should help. So much of our Christian experience revolves around our willingness to be humble before God. Secondly, the second takeaway is the effect of medical missionaries. It just has really astounded us over the years how, when you provide medical assistance to people, how open they are to having you pray with them, tell them about the gospel. How churches have literally risen up from our missions where we just gave them medical attention. They were so grateful, and they would come to church the following weekend. That has been our experience in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Cuba. The importance of medical missionaries. The third takeaway is how important Christian encouragement is when you and I go through a hard time. Never underestimate going out to lunch with someone, or sending them a card, or calling on the phone. Take them out to coffee. That person is going through a difficult time. Coming alongside of them and praying with them. Never underestimate the importance of that. That person realizes, when you go out of your way and do that, that person going through that hard time realizes that I'm not in this alone. Very important. Never underestimate the importance of Christian encouragement. Encouraging one another through hard times. The fourth takeaway is how often physical healing is involved in evangelism in the New Testament. And it really tells me that you and I should be looking for opportunities to pray for people who need a healing. If God opens the door, we should just step out in faith and pray for that person. God is always going to do something. Even if he doesn't heal the person, God's going to show up and probably open up the door so we can share the gospel with that person. So there you have it. Chapter 28. We finished Acts 28. I hope, like you, I'm looking forward to going through the Gospel of Mark. God bless you.